YouTube, what the corn's going on? HeirofCarthage here. Okay, I'll stop. Anyway, no. So, skulls for the skull or blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Hope y'all are excited. This is another Immortal Empires gameplay, and this one is going to also be courtesy of DahvPlays. So if you haven't checked out his channel, go check it out. He's got even more battles going on over there. He was kind enough to help me. And we've got Skarbrand rolling up here. You can tell because his wings have been clipped and he's not allowed to fly. And the Legions of Khorne are going to be going up in a domination battle on the Black Ark map. So yes, this is the Black Ark map that we saw of Warhammer 2 redone for Game 3, which means it's looking a little more crisp, clean, and with a lot more detail. And he's going to be up against King Louen. Leon Kerr. Yeah, it's a mouthful. I'm going to say it wrong. Anyway, Lowen's brought his peasants. This is so that hopefully the demon's sword or axe chopping arms will get very tired before getting the main units. Can you imagine bringing like a dinged up old shovel, whatever this is, kind of bill hook or something, I don't know, and like a pitchfork, and like walking around in this garb, and you're going up against demons whose sole purpose is to like constantly fight in gladiatorial combat. A giant flaming sword. Yeah, I mean that'd be a little bit scary. These peasants have some serious nerve. Behind them, we're gonna have some battle pilgrims. So these are potentially there to probably help counter stuff, maybe such as bloodletters, which are gonna be lower armor. As far as actual armored units, there's probably, I'm guessing, knights that will be potentially dealing with them, or Louen himself, and maybe some magic. We've got a Damsel of Life and some men-at-arms and polearms. Now remember that there will be reinforcements that can come on as this battle goes on, because each player is earning supplies. They can spend said supplies. Looks like both players are going to be challenging this point. Now, bloodletters are going to be really good in general, like against the Bretonnian infantry. Where they're going to suffer is against cavalry because they just don't have the armor. However, they'll punch back against cavalry after the charge because of their AP, so that could be particularly handy. But in this case, like dual weapon Khorne warriors would be pretty solid in a lot of cases as well, but they're also a lot more expensive and would come in fewer numbers, so I can understand why there's going to be a mixture here. Now, plenty of halberds. This makes sense with Bretonnia needing to depend on cavalry for the most part. Look at that big flaming attack from Skarbrand right there. So the fight's going to get started for point 1, and point 1 is already under control of Bretonnia, though it looks like DahvPlays is fairly quickly putting well, he had been capturing point 2, and right now point 3 is actually contesting and going against him. You can see the charge here, the questing knights. That's what I was talking about with the bloodletters. They did do some damage back, but they also got a nasty charge there. So here come the fleshhounds and some warhounds to come in and help add to that. But I mean, you watch here, these bloodletters are going to make real short work of men-at-arms, and it's because they have that bonus versus infantry, and what little armor the men-at-arms have, yeah, they're just cutting right through it. So, not surprisingly, Khorne is just absolutely crushing Bretonnia's infantry and archer resistance here. This is without really even much mobility for Khorne, other than those few fleshhounds that came out. So we haven't even seen any big baddies hit the battlefield, like some skull crushers or blood crushers, stuff like that. But I mean, Skarbrand is pretty tough as it is, and he's getting a really nice engagement against Louen. However, here comes the Royal Pegasus Knights. Skarbrand, though, has pretty decent armor. The Pegasus Knights don't necessarily pierce armor, but they do have a bonus, so they'll still take a good chunk out of him. And there's fairly few polearms around, plus the Damsel can support Louen with healing, plus Lowen's innate healing. So yeah, it could get a little bit crazy here. But at this point, Dav has flipped all the capture points into his favor, and now Bretonnia is going to have to try and push back, so he will be quickly making up for the points that he was falling behind. And we'll have to see whether Bretonnia is able to put together a push. Now, as you start to lose units in a fight like this, and see how a lot of Bretonnia's units are coming back kind of half beat up, that also means that they're not available to be like replenished, where they can be re-recruited new. These pox arrows getting a hold of Skarbrands, that's actually pretty solid. Let's see what Bretonnia is doing down here to challenge us. Fleshhounds are going to be a mess, and so will bloodletters. Like, fleshhounds are going to do a lot of damage to everything except for polearms. And then you got the questing knights that, I mean, they're not going to like getting mixed up in this for too long either. So Bretonnia is going to be in a rough spot here. And, you know, as I try and think about some of Bretonnia's units, what could possibly punch pretty good? I mean, like, questing knights would do good into the armored infantry of Khorne, but you know darn well Khorne's going to be bringing some chaos warriors with halberds. So you got to deal with that. And really, foot squires are going to be fairly good there, but again, they're more expensive. Questing knights, foot squires, and then for anti-large work, you know, you could bring some Knights of the Realm, or if you had more money, the Grail Knights. Khorne is not going to be very good in the air, other than just having Furies. I mean, if they did bring an Exalted Bloodthirster, then they'd have some air power, but I mean, that'd be the only unit. So there's a few ways you could probably punish Khorne's units in that regard, but Warriors with Halberds are a pretty solid pick because Bretonnia doesn't have a real easy can to answer. I think that Foot Squires are probably their best bet, and I mean, you look at the stats on these units, I still don't think Foot Squires beat them. However, they might trade favorably for the cost price point. So I don't know. They wouldn't trade good against Bloodletters, that's for sure. Look at that attack by Scarbrand there, burning through those Grail Knights. That was quite nice. So Scarbrand has managed to put quite a beating on, and Dav is out to a commanding lead at this point. Bretonnia is in pretty rough shape. I like the use of the Furies here to get into bows. This is a great way for Khorne to neutralize lightly armored skirmishers and artillery units. Furies give Khorne some much-needed ability to bypass front lines and just dive straight into missile units. They can also disrupt the charge of more expensive cavalry units. You'll see here some Warhounds coming through. I imagine these are going to be sent on to charge these peasant bowmen. Probably just had to get busy somewhere else with it in order. Look at that, Louen healed all the way back up after taking an initial beating from Scarbrand. Look at that, the Hounds got intercepted. That was nice. The Questing Knights caught them while they lost their orders. Bretonnia still, though, not able to take back a single capture point. Here comes some Foot Squires and some Men-at-Arms. There's more Bloodletters coming on, though, and Bloodletters are going to trade just fine with Foot Squires. Just fine. Like, in fact, quite well, would be my guess. I feel like from an infantry standpoint, that anything Bretonnia can do, Khorne can do better. And, I mean, that makes sense. Bretonnia is more of a cavalry faction. But if you roll all cavalry, again, you're going to run into the trouble of these warriors with halberds and stuff such as them. And then you've still got to deal with, like, hounds and stuff. Now, the thing with the hounds, though, is I feel like Bretonnia has enough armored cavalry options. They can pretty much shut down the hounds. I almost wonder what would be better here. Maybe if you went really heavy on cavalry, like a whole lot of cavalry, and then maybe some Foot Squires and pole arms for your infantry. You could probably have some archers, potentially, like Pox archers and stuff like that would be good for some slows. But if you brought stuff like that, maybe at that point you could punch a little better. Your cavalry would do good damage against anything that's not halberds, and then you do your best to get that infantry into the halberds while using your own cavalry to basically shut down the infantry for Khorne. Look at this, nice cutoff here. So stopping the Bloodletters from getting into that capture point. This is going to allow Bretonnia to flip this one. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this ought to bring in the flip. Now, that was weird. Capture point was actually going back in Dav's favor, even with that unit standing there. That's rather strange. There was nothing on there for Dav. I've not seen that before. All right, there it goes. So the capture point moving into Bretonnia's hands, but, I mean, there's really just no pulling this one back because Bretonnia doesn't really have a way to pull these other capture points back into their favor. Look, there's a skull cannon back here now firing away for DahvPlays. Yeah, this is probably a bit of a tough matchup for Bretonnia. I don't know everything about playing Bretonnia, though, but again, if I'm just guessing, Bretonnia would need to rely on a lot of cavalry, well-armored cavalry, which would then make it a little more difficult for some of the units of Khorne to be effective. And then I think you'd have to just bring some Foot Squires and maybe some of your own pole arms in order to punch back against these warriors with halberds. Now, if Khorne knew that, like, for instance, I mean, there's so many options. Like, Chaos Warriors with dual weapons would smoke all the infantry for Bretonnia, but they're less good against cavalry, so it makes sense why Dav didn't bring them. You can't blame him. I mean, I think I would have been doing a very similar thing as Dav here, which is basically loading up on halberds, bringing plenty of flesh hounds, and just kind of unleashing it. And so, again, I think that probably one of the things that Khorne would struggle with is flesh hounds don't cut through armor very well. And so being able to have all that armored cavalry support as Bretonnia versus quite so much infantry. Battle Pilgrims, to me, like, yeah, they're going to be probably one of the better answers to Bloodletters, but I would just rely on the cavalry. Leave the battle pilgrims at home. Archers, I get why you bring them. You need them for the damages, but at the same time, like, it's just going to be so hard to protect them against Furies. Peasant mob makes sense to me because they can be nice charge blockers, like especially up against stuff like Bloodletters. So I think the peasant mob makes some sense. Plus, they're dirt cheap. But I would trade out the battle pilgrims and the archers and just go for stacking up more cavalry. Whether or not that would work, I don't know. I think having some foot squire options is a good idea. The Pegasus Knights could be handy depending on what you come up against. I'm just not sure that they've got the armor-piercing punch to really get that job done. And then there's a couple of Knights of the Realm here as well. You're definitely going to need a lot of Knights, I think, is Bretonnia. Lots of Knights if you're going to want to win this one. You all tell me what you think about this matchup. It's a tough one. And speaking of tough matchups, I got to play another match against Dav where I did Wood Elves and Kislev, which is one I've been really looking forward to. I've got a video coming up on that soon because, to me, I think it's another tough matchup. I'll let you all think about which one you think it's going to be a tough matchup for. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out for this time. Appreciate Dav and his opponent here. I don't know who his opponent was for this one, but appreciate the match. And here we get to learn something, you know? We get to learn some of the challenges that Bretonnia is going to have against Khorne and how they might be able to potentially overcome it. Again, I think that, like, if you look at some of the different facets of these factions, Bretonnia is definitely going to be the better air faction. But they're also going to have better cavalry because they have far more options. Their infantry is far inferior, I should say. And their missiles don't penetrate armor or do really quick damage, and so it makes their missiles get mostly neutralized. But in any case, hope you all enjoyed this one. HeirofCarthage signing out. See you soon with some more action in Warhammer 3.